Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show, a podcast exclusively designed to create more reproductive health awareness and discuss your fertility preservation options. Here is your host, the Harvard-educated fertility specialist, Dr. Amy.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show. I'm super excited to have Josephine Atluri on today's show. Hi, Josephine.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Dr. Amy.
You are so welcome. And you have to call me Amy. Deal? Okay. Deal. So we're talking about something pretty amazing, and that is how to empower your fertility journey. And it's cool because your last name rhymes with the word journey. Coincidence? I think not. And you also have pretty cool workshops along those lines that I know that you're going to talk to us about, right?
You bet. I'm excited to talk everything mindfulness with you.
So you're a meditation teacher. You guide people towards a calmer existence despite the chaos that may surround them. You have a podcast titled Responding to Life, Living Reflectively Through a Journey of Health, Fertility, and Parenthood. And people also can go to your website to try out video meditations for free. In addition, you also offer specialized fertility empowerment and mindfulness workshops and private sessions. And not only that, you're an author of a book that's coming out, and you teach all over Los Angeles. So welcome, Josephine. Thank you for being here today.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
So thank you for all the work that you do, but I'd love for you to share more about yourself. Can you please share some of your personal fertility story with us?
Absolutely. So my journey began about 15 years ago. It's hard to imagine. And we knew going into it that we would have to begin straight into IVF ICSI because of an illness that my husband had back when we were dating that led to male infertility issues. So we began probably when I was around 25, and we went on for 2 years with back-to-back cycles that unfortunately did not work. And then we decided to switch to another facility and then became pregnant with twins. And after getting through that first trimester, I thought I was in the clear. Things were going great. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, 17 weeks in, water gushed out. And then next thing I know, I'm in the hospital. And unfortunately, we could not save the twins. I was pregnant with twins at the time. And it was at that point that I finally had time to not just grieve the loss of my twins, but just grieve everything. When you're going through cycle after cycle, you really don't afford yourself much time to really process everything because you have to get back in, and it feels so time sensitive because it is, depending on any point in the journey. And so I grieved that. And it was that point that my husband and I decided to really reflect upon our next steps. And that's when we decided that families are made in different ways. They're all born out of love. But that's when we decided to switch to international adoption. And a year later, it was a completely different journey from IVF. I traded in doctor's appointments and procedures with paperwork and interviews. And then we brought our son home from Kazakhstan. And I finally got to be a mother. It was amazing. After a year in, it felt like a cloud had been lifted over us, such that I was ready to try IVF just one more time. So we switched to a third facility, and lo and behold, we became pregnant with twins again. They threw the kitchen sink at me. I had a cerclage where they closed up my cervix. I was on modified bed rest for the majority of the pregnancy, and I carried the twins and delivered them. And then now we were a family of 3 kids, and it was amazing. And during that process, we harvested so many embryos that we froze. And year after year, you get that letter. And I couldn't carry again. When you work so hard for those embryos, they're with you forever. And we thought about surrogacy, but it is just so expensive. And so we saved up every year. We saved up for it. And that's why there's this big gap between my middle set of twins to my little set of twins. And when we finally could pursue that option, we paired up with this amazing woman who's forever in our hearts. And she carried twins for us. And that's how we ended up with 5 kids. So our journey, it took 13 years from the start of IVF to the birth of my last set of twins. Covered IVF, miscarriages, international adoption, and surrogacy. And here we are today. Here I am speaking with you about it.
I got chills listening to you share your story. Thank you. If you were right next to me, you would see the goosebumps. So what inspires you to do the work that you do now?
What inspires me to do the work that I do, particularly with fertility, mindfulness, and meditation, is really that journey that I went through, that my husband and I went through. Back then, it was about 15 years ago at the start of it, we didn't have the benefit of all of these resources that are available to people now in terms of all these support groups, all of these online communities that are out there that are amazing, and just this access to information that really wasn't readily available back then. And when I look back at my journey, I remember feeling really alone, really beaten down in terms of my self worth and just mentally, emotionally, physically. And I really, it doesn't have to be that way. So my passion for doing this is to just, if I can help one person go through this process just a little bit, feel like they're a little bit more in control, feel a little bit more in tune with themselves and a little less sad about the whole process, then it's a win and I feel fulfilled.
I feel like we're a lot alike because I say to myself, if I could have one thing that I do, make one person out there shed less tears, then it was worth it for me. So it's pretty amazing that we're like-minded in that way. Where do you get your strength and resilience from? Because I'm sure it didn't just come like that. It must have been something that you trained yourself to do, or maybe it is a gene that you have that we all need to know about.
That's a great question, Amy. So, and I get this question often, where do I get my strength and resilience from? And after some time thinking about it, I really think it stemmed from that experience with my husband, but back then he was my boyfriend when he was going through this illness that he had. And it was a near death experience. And when you're going through something like that, it really changes your perspective. And if you're lucky to come through that experience on the other side of things, and you're lucky enough to really apply it to your life and not just say maybe that first year, then it really colors everything that you do in your life. And so from that experience, we realized how precious life is. And then we realized how strong our bond was, our relationship. And so during all of the low points of all of those cycles, I knew that I always had my husband right next to me and that he would lift me up when I couldn't lift myself.
Yeah, that's great. I married my hero. So he gives me a lot of the strength and resilience too. So you run a workshop called Empowering Your Fertility Journey. Tell us about it.
Yes. So it is a 90-minute workshop. And the goal of it is to basically teach the essentials of meditation and mindfulness so that you can incorporate it into your fertility journey. And it offers you support and empowerment. And essentially, what you learn are different techniques, such as breathing techniques. You learn how to scan your body. You learn how to use a mantra. And then you learn other techniques that are helpful for you along the way, such as affirmations, journaling. Plus, it's a great way to meet in a safe space with other men and women, maybe not in the same situation that you are in, but can completely understand what you're going through and you're in it together. And so a lot of the women from the last workshop still keep in touch with one another. We did a reunion sort of meditation together. We were all able to see where everyone was at in their journey. So it is great. And you're able to walk away with actual tools that you can use for yourself on a daily basis.
Love it. And how often are the workshops?
I'm doing them every quarter. It's over Zoom, just like everything else. And it's, like I said, 90 minutes long.
Okay. I have my mantras that I share with my patients. And so I know how important and valuable this kind of mindset is for people. So you guys joined her next workshop. I'd like you to share with us some of the things that you learned during your journey that you think can help people who are listening and watching us right now.
So I learned so many things, as I'm sure many of your patients can attest to. But I think that the top three things that I learned would be one, I'm not defined by the outcomes of my journey, to learn to let go of things that I can't control. And there are many of those things. And to just trust whatever process you're in. And then I learned the power of the pause. So I'll just briefly go into each of them. In terms of that first one about not being defined by the outcome, as you're going through these cycles, you become so intertwined in what's happening. And over time, you start to identify with everything that's happening when really it isn't your fault and you're completely worthy of becoming a mother. You are completely enough, but it's hard as you're going through it. You're wondering, like, what is it that I'm doing wrong? What's happening in my body that's not allowing this to be? And as women, especially, we are tied to this idea that we are the ones who are supposed to have children. And so why isn't this happening? It took me a lot of time. I think perhaps towards the end of it that I really took that message to heart. And with the benefit of time, you're really able to work on that. But that's something I would have reminded myself back in the beginning. And then the second point I made was about letting go of control. So there are many things that you can control in life, and there are many things that you can't. And what I learned both through IVF, through the adoption, through the surrogacy, I learned in all three of those different paths, there were many things in that situation that I could not control, but I could control my breath. I could control my mindset. I could control many other aspects, my nutrition, my fitness, all of these other things. And to rather than focus on the stuff that was really just wearing me down and wearing me out because I just was fighting with it because I couldn't control it, instead just shifting a little bit to the things that I could control. And just that little shift really helps you immensely because then you're just letting go of all the worry that comes with all that other stuff. And then the third was the power of the pause, which I did mention in the beginning, back when we had that loss, that second trimester loss. I was really forced into this moment of pause because if that didn't happen, I could very well imagine myself just having gone, just kept going through the whole process. But at that point, I was forced into this pause. And that's when I really realized how important it was for us to just take moments of, of rest. And I'm not saying it has to be like a month long or more than that. It can really just be a couple minutes a day where you just pause from everything and give yourself a time for rest and reflection. And it also gives you a moment of perhaps reflection on where you are in your journey to reevaluate. Can I keep going on like this? Is it time to maybe pursue other options? Is it time to have a discussion with my doctor about maybe something else that we haven't tried? Because you can get into this hamster wheel, this cycle of just, let's just keep going. Let's just keep trying because time is of the essence. So those are the top three things that I think really made a difference as I progressed through our journey.
And I love all of those things. And thank you for sharing. I know people who are listening and watching will learn a great deal from today's podcast. I think a reset, regroup, reconnect. Those are the three things that I think that are a great way of thinking about what you're saying about pause. And I think it's so important to do all of those things because you're right. There's that social pressure to just keep going. And then if you keep going and you're not listening to your brain and your brain's like, wait, something's just not right, then there's this like disconnect. And you really got to just make sure your brain, your heart, and your uterus and ovaries are all on the same page as much as possible. So what are some steps that someone dealing with fertility can do or take right now to help with serenity and mindfulness?
It's all in our power to be able to tap into this inner calm that we have. That's a message that I always let my students know right from the get-go. And the biggest tool at your disposal is always with you, which is your breath. So the number one thing that I always teach people to be able to get into a state of mindfulness and serenity right now is to incorporate some breathing techniques. And there's so many that you can do. But before I go through one example, just the benefit of it is this. When you're in a state of stress, you're in this fight or flight state, right? There, part of your nervous system is split into two, and you're in this sympathetic nervous state. And if you want to switch over to this rest and digest, the parasympathetic nervous system, that gateway is through your breath, lo and behold. And so when you take a deep breath, especially if you can get it in from your belly and work your way up, you are sending a signal to your brain that you are not in a state of stress. You are not being attacked by that tiger or being attacked by that email that you just received that just set you off, that you are instead going from that state of stress and into that state of calm. And the more you continue to do that, you'll start to feel your heart beating less. You'll start to feel your blood that was like really beating and going fast to slow down. Maybe you were sweating in the process. That will start to cool down. Your body will start to cool down. So many things switch over when you're from that state of stress into that rest and digest. And the amazing thing is that you're doing it just by breathing. And so when you're in, let's say you're waiting to get your blood drawn, or you're lying there getting your ultrasound taken and no one is speaking to you because they're busy doing their scan, and you're just getting worked up because you're thinking about all of the things that happened in the past that didn't work. You're thinking about all the what ifs of the future, all the things you have to do for this cycle, and you're just getting triggered, right? If you in that moment can utilize a breathing technique, then you can bring yourself down into that state of calm that you have inside. And then you're in that moment and then you're relaxed so that when they're speaking to you, when someone from the doctor's office is speaking to you, you're actually there. You're able to process that information versus having them talk to you, which happened to me so many times. They would be speaking to me, but the moment I heard the negative news, my mind was elsewhere. I was not processing anything in that moment. And I walked out of that appointment not knowing what my next steps were and having to frantically email the nurse to find out what we were supposed to be doing next. So if you can just practice in those moments, then you can really just build up that connection to that calm because it's all about practice. If you practice a new instrument or language, where you're building is a stronger pathway in your brain. And the more you practice it, the stronger it becomes and the easier it becomes for you to get into that state of calm that you need to when you get triggered. And you're more mindful because now you know what those triggers are and you can almost offset it if you're able to. And if you can't, that's okay because you know how to de-stress right away. And so that's why I like teaching breathing techniques. One quick one takes 16 seconds. If you breathe in for 4 seconds and then hold your breath for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds and hold your breath for 4 seconds. And now you can continue doing that as I'm talking, or you can just breathe regular, fine. But the beauty of that breathing technique is that you can't think of anything else. If you were playing along, you're thinking about the counts. You're thinking about, oh, I have to exhale or oh, I have to pause. You can't think about that meeting or that grocery list. You can't think about any of it. And imagine that if you can do that in a moment that where you're actually stressed out, then you can really tap into that calm in that moment. That would be my number one takeaway for anyone who's trying to get into a state of mindfulness and serenity and doesn't really know how to do it. That's the number one tool.
Yeah, I'm so surprised by people. I like to ask people questions, kind of like doing a survey whenever I'm in groups of people. So the last survey that I've been doing is in the operating room. I'm doing surgery and I just asked everyone in the operating room, there's an OR tech, an OR nurse, anesthesiologist. And I say, hey, how many of you guys have actually taken a mindfulness class or a meditation class? I'm just shocked and surprised that it may be like me. That's the only person that's done that. And so I find the skills, it's like a life skill. I feel like people should not be graduating high school without this life skill, especially now. So thank you. I'm so grateful that the universe brought us together. And it was actually the Motherly article that you wrote. I love that article last month, How to Reduce Stress While Trying to Conceive. So can you share what you wrote in that article with us?
Yes, I love that we were connected. It's so great. And it's true what you say about mindfulness. They're actually starting to teach it in my kids' school. Every time they have are forced to learn it, they always begrudgingly come over to me and tell me that they had to do mindfulness. Or anyway, it's funny. But with that Motherly article, I talked about how to essentially set a foundation of support and strength for yourself as you go through your fertility journey. And I offered 4 key points for that. The first one was to communicate with your partner. Then it was to find your support network or your TTC tribe. Then it was to set boundaries. And then finally to create a self-care toolkit for yourself. And so going back to that first point of communicating with your partner, I didn't realize it until I was going through that path of surrogacy, what it really felt like to be in my husband's shoes. Because I was finally standing on the sidelines and I was in this, but I really wasn't because she was the one who was carrying the babies. And I basically stood on the sidelines waiting to hear what she needed from us and how I could support her. And then it clicked. I thought, oh my gosh, this is what my husband went through all those years of going through IVF. And it sucks, by the way. It sucks because you want to help this person, you love this person, but you simply don't know. And so that really helps me with coaching people that you actually just need to tell them what you need because they can't read your mind and they don't know what you're going through physically, mentally, emotionally. Your partner wants to help you, but you really need to communicate like what you need in that moment and not to wait for them to do it because you're in the driver's seat. You're the one who is having all the shots or doing all the procedures and then hopefully eventually carrying babies. So and in that same vein, in terms of asking for some support, it's really key to find your tribe. And it's great right now because there's so many different communities available out there that if one doesn't work, you can try another. Really just finding a group of people that understand what you're going through and can be there for you if you need to vent or if you just need someone to listen because oftentimes, at least I found with myself, my friends weren't experiencing the same thing that I was going through. Some weren't even trying to have kids at that moment. And then those that were, they were not having any trouble. And so I felt so alone. And you don't want to feel alone. You shouldn't have to. So if you can even just find one person that's going through this that can be your buddy, all the better. Like I said, if you go on social media, there's so many different people who have. Amy has her Instagram, and everyone has Instagram or Facebook. Even if you're just watching from the sidelines, at least you get some comfort through that. And then the third point was to set boundaries. And this was really key in terms of not getting triggered. So it's that step of any issues from happening. If you can, as much as possible, all the better, because then you don't put yourself in that stressful situation. But sometimes it just comes out of left field and there's nothing you can do about it. But that's when all these mindfulness techniques are really beneficial. So examples of boundaries would be not not having to talk about what's happening. Your partner can help with that. Like when you're especially going into the holidays, maybe that partner can just give everyone a heads up that you're not comfortable talking about it, not to bring it up. Talk about other stuff. Here are some other things you can talk about. And that's what I mean about setting boundaries. You can set boundaries for yourself. If you know that you're just not in the right space, maybe don't go on social media because you don't want to be true. So really figuring it out and you just play that by ear. And then the last tip was to create a self-care toolkit. And back in the day, we didn't talk about self-care. And this is so great that people are talking about it now. But things like the breathing technique, mindfulness, doing meditation, and then other things of going for a walk or journaling or doing affirmation. But you really need to have a good amount of stuff in your toolkit because some days require more things because it's just that heavy of a day. And sometimes one day you're not feeling the affirmation, but you have something else. So it's great to try new things so that you can really take care of yourself when you need to.
I'm so excited for all the things that you've shared with us. And the reason is this: we're going to have an article that people can read and print out and always have with them and put in their fertility binder of all the things that you've shared with us. So if they ever forget the things and the tools that you've brought today to this show, the article will be a reminder. So thank you. And we'll also include a link to the Motherly article as well. And you mentioned affirmations. What are some affirmations that are your favorites that you use during challenging times?
So for anyone that doesn't know what an affirmation is, it's just a simple phrase that you repeat to yourself, again, in that same vein of offering you strength and support. So examples of my favorite ones, especially right now with everything happening in the world, are things like, I'm safe, I'm healthy. And then if you're going through infertility, you're going through your journey, great affirmations to say are, I am worthy, I am enough, I'm strong, I'm brave, I'm resilient, I'm courageous, I am enough. I'm loved. And then you use them. You can use them as your mantra in the meditation, but you can also use them as you're sitting in the waiting room. Say you're about to go in for some news here and you're just getting all worked fidgety. And instead of scrolling on your phone, just sitting there and repeating those words to yourself. One question I've received in the past is, what if I'm saying those things, but I don't believe it? And that's okay. I do affirmations with my kids and a lot of clients, and they don't believe it at first. But that's okay because what you're doing is you're giving yourself just another pathway in your brain that you can cling on to. So when we feed ourselves negative thoughts, that's what our brain has. But if we feed ourselves these words of strength and support, these words of positivity, then it has something else to hold on to. And eventually over time, your mind will want to go and then you'll start to believe. So that's the beauty of it.
It's funny that you say that because I tell my patients, you are strong, you are resilient. Now go make magic happen and keep sparkling. You say the same thing. So I think it's really important to say that to yourself. And then if patients need a reminder, I often remind them too. So that's funny. So what about if you mentioned like your husband's role and your role and not just knowing what to do, but also as like a friend that you're supporting that's going through this. And sometimes people listen to my shows because they're trying to learn for a family member or a friend. So I want to ask you this question so you can give some advice to them too. So if your loved one is dealing with fertility challenges, what steps can we take to effectively support them?
Love this question. And I love that you have listeners who are listening for the benefit of supporting their loved ones. It's fantastic. And thought about this question and I thought about a friend of mine who is going through infertility. And I remember at first when I was speaking to her that I wanted to give her all this advice about what I had gone through and what my best practices were and all these things. And then I feel like I just stopped at one point when I was hearing the silence. And I thought, you know what? Maybe she just wants to talk. Maybe she just wants to offload whatever she's feeling without hearing about all of my stuff and what my advice for her is. So that would be, I think, my number one suggestion for someone who's trying to support a loved one who's going through it. We all have things that we want to say to them. We may even have experience in it, and that's great. But what this person really needs is just the space, a safe space to be able to release and let go of whatever they're just holding on to, whatever that's weighing them down, and to know that you aren't going to judge them. You aren't going to try and just talk them through some sort of self help thing. They really just want to be able to let go of it. And I think that's the best thing that you can do. And then if they do ask, hey, you went through it, what is your advice? That's when you can offer your advice, but to really just wait for them.
Googling stuff and then sharing articles with them that have nothing to do with what they're going through is not helpful. They've already done that on their own. Trust me. So before we end today's show, I would just love to hear what your favorite quote is and why.
Yes, I love this question, and I love that you end with it. So my favorite quote is by Lao Tzu, and he wrote, "When I let go of who I am, I become what I might be." And there's so many different interpretations of this quote, but the two ways that I like to look at it and really bring it back to this idea of being mindful and being present is that so often we're caught up in this idea of what we should. And this is totally like relevant to going through infertility or fertility journey. You're caught up in this idea of I should be a mother and it should happen this way. And you get so fixated on that. And then when it doesn't happen in the manner in which you thought, just so many things come with it, so much emotion, so much baggage comes with it. But if in a moment you can just go of all of that, and maybe it's just during your meditation or just for the few moments that you're doing your breathing, if you can just let go of all that expectation, it is so freeing. And you give yourself space to just be who you are in that moment. And then after that moment, if you go back to it, okay, that's fine. But then just practicing getting to that point where you can just have that feeling of freedom. And it just gives you so much space. And then the other way I like to look at that phrase is the idea of being present in the moment is that we're so caught up in thinking about the things that happened in the past, like who I was in the past. or who I should be in the future. You're not thinking about and experiencing who you are in this moment. And that's so relevant with trying to do all these for assisted reproductive therapies. You're caught up in everything that didn't work out, all of the cycles that you're about to do, but you're not living this moment and this time, which, albeit frustrating and hard, I'm betting there are some moments in it that are just worth appreciating and being mindful of. So that's why I love that quote, because there's just so many different ways that you can interpret it and apply it to one's fertility journey and just life.
And that's exactly how very similar to my favorite quote, which is, if you take care of today, tomorrow will take care of itself. Because it can be so overwhelming when you're starting on a path and you want it to be a path, but it turns into a journey. It can be quite overwhelming to be like, but I'm here and I really want to be here. And then you think of all the steps that are going to take to get there. And you just got to center yourself and just literally just live in the moment. So that's pretty fantastic that you share that quote with us today. So thank you, Josephine. Let us know again, where can people find you, your Instagram handle, your website? Please share it all right now with us.
Yep. I love your quote, by the way. And thank you so much for the opportunity today. People can go to my website, which is jatluri.com, Atluri. On there, you'll find there's a fertility meditation. You can find just general video meditations that you can practice. Be signed up for my upcoming Empowering Your Fertility Journey workshop is on there, which is on November 14th. And you can also find me on social media at Josephine R. Atluri, as well as my podcast called Responding to Life, where I talk about my journey as well as other people's fertility journey. Talk about mindfulness there as well. So I hope to see you on one of those different avenues.
Awesome. And then be sure to check out her website for her meditations as well. You do have some free meditations that are fabulous. So I hope people will reach out to you and just learn just as much as we learned today and more.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Josephine. Have a great day. And thank you everyone for joining us on today's show. And we'll see you back here next time. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening and making the Egg Whisperer Show a part of your weekly routine. To find show notes and a full transcript for this episode, visit dramy.org and look under the blog tab. While you're there, you can find a link for the Egg Whisperer newsletter, which keeps you in the know about fertility news. You can also find Dr. Amy and the Egg Whisperer Show on YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook. If you'd like to learn even more, Dr. Amy offers classes at the Egg Whisperer School, eggwhispererschool.com, or you can request a consultation on dramy.org. Thank you so much for tuning in and for sharing the Egg Whisperer Show with others. Keep sparkling and have a great day.